Okay. Okay, so in this video I'll go through Zbrush to Substance Painter and IDs, generating IDs. I must tell them that to generate ID for Substance Painter. Okay, so in this video I'll be going through generating IDs from Zbrush to Substance Painter. And the workflow for this is, what I have right now is a high-res sculpt. So assume this is a high-res sculpt, and that's a polygroup. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this polygroup as ID in Substance Painter, which I did in the previous time lapse. Now I feel this is important so that for the next step before we move on to Substance Painter, we need to understand generating IDs is an important thing. So yeah, I'll be going through a very small video on how do I create IDs in Zbrush for Substance Painter. So what I have here is polygroups. Alright, so these polygroups are just based on separate meshes. So right now what I just did was I just came down to the polygroups tab, right, and I just clicked on the auto groups. Right now I can have my very own custom made polygroup. So I can mask it, and I can press Ctrl plus W, right, to polygroup that. Okay, and that will polygroup the front and the back for me. Okay, so here I have a polygroup, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer this information to Substance Painter as an ID map. So one way I can do that is I can leave it this way. I can leave it with polygroups as well. Substance Painter does read polygroups, but if I want specific colors, that means if this is yellow, right, and yellow means the box, and purple means another color on another specific object, then I need to use Polypaint. Okay, now Polypaint in Zbrush is but color, nothing but color, which you guys will see from this brush icon. Okay, what I want to do is I want to come down to this Polypaint option, and I want to click Polypaint from polygroups. Right, what I will do is I will take the information that I have and I will project it on my mesh based on my geometry. Okay, now sometimes this may not be accurate, so what I may do is, because of my lack of geometry, I can come in and divide my mesh and then come in and polygroup again. You see that gives me a better polygroup, right? So depending on how many times I can divide, right, that'll give me a much more nicer polygroup, right? And this is, maybe let's say this is enough. Okay, now once I'm done with this, what I can do is I can go to my tool option. I can export. Now either I can export it as an OBJ, so I can come here, export, and what I have is I can call this Polypaint. Right, this will be my Polypaint mesh, Polypaint underscore hi, right? And this will be a OBJ mesh, right, an OBJ format. Right, if I want to use Substance Painter bake by mesh name options, right, I can use the FBX format from Zbrush. Okay, so that is from the Z plugins FBX export and import. Okay, but right now, since we're going through a very simple example, I'm going to just export with an OBJ. Right, so just give that some time to export, because that's like 2.6 million, which is quite a lot. Right, so you can see underneath the Z plugins tab, we have the FBX export and import, and I can come in and export this guy as well to every visible object or every selected object. Right, that'll give me the correct names for baking by mesh name. Right, now once I'm done with Zbrush, what I can go is I can go to Maya, right, to build my low poly mesh. Now in this case I already done it. Right, I already have a low poly mesh over here, right, which is just a very simple object beveled in. Right, I also came in and I mesh display soften edge, right, just so that I made some nice soft borders. Right, and the UVs are the default UVs of a cube. Right, nothing fancy over here. Right, So I have a high-res mesh. So this is the same high-res mesh I imported from Zbrush, and this was just for I can decimate it in Zbrush and get it back to Maya, so that I can make a low-res version of it in its correct position based on the correct size and scale of it. Okay, and then this low-res mesh, once I make it, in our current example, which we were making earlier, we just made a flat plane, right? So this can be a plane, a box, anything, as long as it's within the same size. It's the same size as the high-res mesh. Okay, so I can come into this low-res and file, export, and export it as my box underscore low FBX file, right? And then it asks me to replace it, and then I replace it, right? Once I have my low-res and my high-res, which is low-res from Maya, high-res from Zbrush, I can go to Substance Painter, right? So I already have this file here. So let's say I create it from scratch. I come to File, New, right? Depending on my project settings. In this case, I'll take the box low, right? Select the low-res mesh, and in this case, depending on our game engine, in this case we're using DirectX because we're using Unreal Engine for our file. Then I click OK. Right? So that'll give me the same mesh, the same object. Right? It should have the same wireframe. Right? And all I need to do is come into this bake mesh maps. So once again, whenever you guys get anything to Substance Painter, make sure you bake mesh maps always, right? Even if you do not have a high-res mesh. Come into your output size, change it to the files that you think you need, file size that you need it. In this case, I'll just bake the normals and the IDs, right? So in this case, coming to the IDs, it really depends on my geometry, right? So for example, depending on what my mesh is. So let's say in this case, I can use the mesh ID / polygroup if I do not want a specific color, but it will still read my polygroups. But if I want a specific color, exactly the same color as ZBrush, I'm going to use the vertex color. Right? Material and file, they are a bit different. Material is, I can get Maya's material, any particular shader material. File IDs are based on each texture set. Right? So I can come in over here to my comments tab, and I can add my high-res mesh. So I come in to this guy, Polypaint _ high, and I'll get that in. And because I just want to increase my frontal distance, because I know that this distance is pretty high from my mesh. Maybe in the future I'll make a tutorial on baking, right? But for now, you just have to sort of understand that because my high-res is quite big, right? The silhouette is quite different, so I need this frontal distance to be bigger, right? So it can catch that information that's going up, right? So that's frontal distance that's going up, and what's going inside the mesh is the rear distance. Okay, give it some time to bake. Okay, there we go. Right, so that's our bake result. Not too bad, right? We get some nice edge highlights for this low poly mesh, right? We also don't get any skewing, right? And what I can come in and do is I can check my IDs, right? So I can check my IDs based on ZBrush, and let's say based on ZBrush, I have this yellow, red, green, purple, blue, and coming into Substance, yellow, red, green, purple, blue, right? And these have a very nice effect, right? So in Substance Painter, whenever I start blocking, right, I always start blocking by, let's say, let's say in this case, I'll type the top parts, I create a folder, I create a black mask, right? So maybe in the future, I'll create a more in-depth tutorial for Substance. And what I'm going to use is I'm going to use this color selection, right? Color selection tool, and this will pick out my ID, right? So let's say in this case, I have a particular fill layer, and let's say this fill layer has a particular color, right? So that means this color will be red based on this ID. And I always like doing this because I get to save time, right? Because there's another tool in Substance that I can use, which is the polygon fill tool, right? I can use that, but you can see if I press number 4 over here, the polygon fill tool has only triangles, quads, mesh, and UVs. So in this case, it's very hard to sort of paint these kind of stuff when your object is sort of like this, right? So let's say, for example, I just sort of check this out, right? So let's say press 4, so you can see the wireframe. So it's very difficult for you guys, I mean for anyone I guess, to sort of paint out the square or maybe any other more complicated shape. So that's why I like to use the ID from ZBrush or Maya depending on the surface and depending on the software that I use. Right. So this should be a good example for you know, Substance Painter. Right. I can call this the main box. You know, I can call another folder, you know, the top 4. Right. I can have another black mask. I can come in to the filter, add a color selection, pick the colors that I want. Right. So I can keep picking these colors. Right. And basically these colors, if I throw in a fill layer inside of them, right, what will happen is they will all contain the same color. Right. And if I pick the other color as well from there, it will contain that color as well. Right. So it's very fast to block it out. This is why I prefer to use the Polypaint from ZBrush if I'm using ZBrush to sculpt, right? And it's a very nice tool. Right? So that should be my main reason, or main reason for getting to Substance, because this masking is very fast, right? And this is one of the things that I wanted to tell you guys based off last time. Why did I actually make it so colorful, right? Why did I actually polypaint it from polygroups? Okay, and this should be it, right? So next video we'll be going through time lapse of Substance Painter, right? And I mean, depending on time lapse, or I think it's mostly going to be time lapse, right? And yeah, so see you around for another video next time, right? So maybe in the future I may make tutorials for Substance or baking, you know, more in depth. But for now, I just want to go through, you know, what are the key things, key most important points, right? If you know the software and stuff, you know, you can go through it, right? But I think these are pretty important things as well, right? So see you next time. Bye bye.